So Ian, full story, first time Ignite, please be gentle. Posing the question, like, are you kind of missing the point if you have a DevOps team? So before I get into that, let me give a little background on myself and like why this topic is interesting to me. So I'm a founding engineer at Full Story. We're currently a little over 150 people, but when I joined, there were 4. So we've gone through quite a bit of transition and things have changed quite a bit then. This is employees 5 through 8. So in the beginning, we were kind of banging rocks together. It was all MVP, right? Just try and find some product market fit. We weren't thinking about reliability. We weren't thinking about automation, like none of that. It was just like care and feeding. And everybody really had their hands in the product at the same time. But we were small enough and our scale was tiny enough that that wasn't really a problem. Eventually though, company grew, customers grew, products started to move kind of into adolescence, and that started to be a problem. So, okay, let's make some little teams. We'll have an API team, search team, et cetera. But they were still really dependent. So due to technical problems, like the app was really largely a monolith. Some of the teams were really small, maybe only 2 people on a team. Also, the teams just didn't have kind of the expertise and knowledge for kind of owning an entire life cycle of their services. They were still relying on the platform team that I led for a lot of the things that they would need to do. So they might do development, but we would orchestrate deployments for them. From a development side, we did a lot of the sharding of the monolith into different pieces. We also led a conversion to Kubernetes so things could be more consistent. So we were doing a lot of those kind of like operational type things for the groups. But over time, as more and more of those things got taken care of, things got a little bit more commoditized. We could have kind of more stamp out common solutions and give people the tools and the know-how that they needed. They could start to take control of their own things. So right now, after it honestly was like several years of that kind of transition, we're kind of moving into phase 3 where people can really be independent and kind of manage things on their own. And so own all the pieces of the application lifecycle. Charity Majors, she tweeted recently what I think is like a great summary of kind of where we want to be. So she's devoted to creating a world where every engineer is on call for their services and nobody hates it or thinks it sucks. So as long as you can kind of expand on call to include build, test, deploy, et cetera, then that's like exactly where we want to go. And as Liz just pointed out before, the nobody hates it or thinks it sucks is really important. You can't just kind of throw people into that scenario and expect it all to work, but you've got to make sure they have the support, knowledge, et cetera, to actually be successful in that. So let me tie all this back to the beginning. Is it wrong to have a DevOps team? So I think in order to answer this, we need to have some kind of shared definition. People can mean really different things when they use this phrase. So as my highly unscientific way of trying to answer this, I entered this phrase into a bunch of job search engines to see like what do actually people put for job requirements if you search for this. One of the common patterns that I found was they're viewing the DevOps team as a provider of tooling to other teams. So an example would be, in this case, there's some developer team and they needed some delivery mechanism and they need some observability. And like, great, DevOps is gonna build some stuff and I'm gonna hand it to you and then you're gonna use that to manage your own services. And this seems like a pretty healthy pattern to me. It's kind of the tool maker pattern. And so they can do this to many different teams and they're not necessarily taking on responsibility for those services. So this gives me the thumbs up. Another pattern, though, that I saw was sometimes you would see kind of keywords in the descriptions where they would be talking about services or they were talking about on-call responsibilities, and it would be like very unclear exactly what the relationship was with these services. Are these services that we are just advising on or we're providing tooling for, or are we actually taking responsibility for these? A lot of kind of yellow flags there. The biggest one I saw was there was one where there was 5 different teams mentioned all in one sentence, and it was like very unclear what the relationships were between these. And so when I read this, this starts to look a whole lot like the example that Andrew Clay Schaefer was talking about this morning, where this is really a traditional kind of throw it over the wall and you're gonna run it for me situation, but we're just gonna call it DevOps because that's the cool new phrase, and maybe people won't notice that we're still using that old scenario. But before I judge too harshly, if I sort of think retrospectively about where my own company has gone, back when we were in the banging stones together phase, we weren't accomplishing anything DevOps related. That was farthest from our mind. And even in the first phase when we were on dependent teams, that was really kind of the traditional model. People were kind of throwing things over to us and we were managing it for them. And it wasn't until we had gone down a long path of actually getting the pieces in place to be able to move into that really you build it, you run it scenario that we could really say that we're in the toolmaker phase. So if you're not quite where you want to be in that, just kind of think about where you are on the path, and maybe you'll get there, and you're just a little bit too early. Thanks.
So last year I talked about burritos, and this year I'm going to talk about donuts. I really like food. So I'm talking about sugar. But why am I talking about this? As technologists, we don't use one of my favorite senses, which is taste. We talk about needs and feeds and speeds, maybe how much capacity something has, but we never use our mouth. But also, I can't eat JSON. Here we have a delicious box of Krispy Kreme donuts, and actually the Apache Marathon for my donut service. And how would we attack this delicious box of donuts? Do we kill the first one or the outside one? How do we tackle this donut problem? And it's basically, hey, I would like a donut. So in my upcoming examples, on the left would be resources, so a type of donut, and then on the right would be the available resources we have to fulfill those requests. So glaze goes with glaze, chocolate goes with chocolate. But also, since this is a talk on resource managers, there's several pillars that I want to talk about, from scheduling to constraints to reservations. And how does this actually play into the workloads that we have? I want you to envision your workloads as one being placed on a resource manager. Okay, so the first thing we have to worry about is the schedule. So what is a schedule? It's a sequence of events that have to happen for a certain amount of activities. So this can be things that happen before or after. And basically, when you're scheduling work, you're looking at the sequence for those activities to occur. The next thing is assignment. Now, once you have those activities, you're actually starting to place constraints on those on the resources itself, saying, hey, these are what need to happen at a certain amount of time. So it actually bodes well with the schedule. And also, these things called constraints. Do I want a chocolate donut? Do I want a glazed donut? They're basically statements that have to be proven to be true for an assignment to occur. So after you have your assignment, where do we go about finding where to get that donut with that particular constraint? And eligibility. Okay, when all those things are true, you have the eligible resource. So as we have here, the chocolate donut has to be fulfilled with the multi-pack here. And also the glazed donuts, well, the most obvious place for the eligible for that particular glazed donut is the glazed pack. Who here knows what this sign means here? Yes, I gave this talk one more place in New York, and like no one knew what it meant. It was like, when you see this sign, that means that there's hot and fresh donuts at 8 p.m. at Krispy Kreme. So basically, it's a time base for when your assignment is true. It's a reservation. Getting a little bit more complicated now, it's something that's hard to explain in 15 seconds. It's a challenge. Is DRF, Dominant Resource Fairness. And what this states is that no one type of resource should be overbearing when you have a cluster. In this particular example, there's a clear reason why if I want 3 donuts, I go to the multi-pack and schedulers. There's actually 3 types of schedulers out there when you're looking to schedule work. There's a monolithic, there's a 2-level, and there's the Illuminati scheduler called a shared state scheduler. Let's look at what these schedulers actually do. Monolithic scheduling. So this is like Apache Yarn. It's really one for one. The scheduler and the executor are all in one. Pretty simple request we have here. I need 2 chocolate donuts. I go straight to the multi-pack for the chocolate donuts. But it gets more complicated. 2-level scheduling. And so what 2-level scheduling does, it actually takes into concept of reservations in place also. So looking at the available infrastructure, what actually makes sense to be right-sized? So as we go transversing the available infrastructure, we find that for my 4 donuts, the last is the best. And here's what I call the Illuminati scheduler, the shared state scheduler. If you look at the scheduler, it's like a Google Omega or Microsoft Apollo. And what this means is that the same goal we have, but using a Yelp review versus a Google Maps, how do we go find the best donuts? And that's pretty much it. You've got a very advanced computer science theory in terms of donuts in 4 minutes-ish. So hope you're hungry. If you want some more donuts, come visit us at the Appdynamics booth. I'll buy you a donut.
Hey, I'm Spencer. I've worked at MailChimp for about 4 years. I'm a site reliability engineer. And I'm going to be talking briefly about the importance of a good dashboard. This talk is really kind of a primer on how and why to invest in your internal dashboards, mostly looking at dashboards for like service health and that sort of thing, less for dashboards that you might use for like exposing to a customer about your product. I think it's important to open this by saying that dashboards live forever in this context, which is to say You might make a dashboard thinking that I'm going to use this for a month or two, but it's not super important. But those things tend to stick around for a while. What we found is that in our internal Grafana instance, which is just one of 3 services that we use for hosting dashboards, we have 541 unique dashboards. Very few of them are maintained or watched. But when stuff goes wrong, inevitably someone, first thing to do is look up if there's a dashboard related. A brief story about opcache. Opcache is used by PHP. It's a bytecode cache that is used by PHP essentially to ensure that you're not having to recompile your PHP code every single request. One day on one of our app servers, it stopped working. We had to figure out why, so the first thing we did was we went and we opened Grafana and put in opcache. Here was our lovely dashboard. There were 4 panels and no context. We generally had an idea of what was going on. We knew what opcache did, but during this incident, these graphs all went flat, and we didn't understand why. As it turns out, the way that you monitor opcache is by running a PHP script that calls out to opcache in this instance, and that is a circular dependency that was broken. Opcache had it essentially had compiled some invalid bytecode and was now trying to load that when we were trying to watch opcache. So we couldn't watch any of our data. This led us to our first revelation about dashboards, which is context is king. These days, we put these short blurbs at the top of each of our dashboards to kind of give an idea of where the data comes from, what it means, who set it up, when and why, that kind of little brief bit of context. But assuming we'd had all that context, we still might not have figured out what was actually wrong, which led us to our next revelation, which is that you should embed cross-linking in your dashboards. That is to say, have drill down links, have elevator views, so that people can, if they think that this is a subject worth continuing investigation on, can easily dive deeper, or if they realize this isn't where they wanted to go, that they can go the other way and back on out. This is an example of us doing that. You don't have to link to just dashboards with this. You can also link to things like logs or even your documentation, and often for tools like Grafana and Kibana, you can use templating to make these external links even more finely honed. In some cases, we aren't even linking to internal dashboards or anything anymore. We'll link straight to administrative tools. So if you find a bad user, you can go straight from our logs into our internal administration tools where you can lock them out of API access or something along those lines. Our third major kind of revelation about dashboards is that slow dashboards are nearly useless. In many cases, we were trying to cram everything we could onto one dashboard for a service, and then it would take 3, 4, 5 minutes to load, which isn't great when you're on call. We kind of set up these little guidelines to help people out. If your tool supports it, use collapsible rows, set reasonable time intervals so that you're not loading 2 months of data in one dashboard, and don't just cram it all in one place. If you have that deep linking, you shouldn't need that kind of context. Some other general guidelines: keep labels meaningful, specify units, remember accessibility, things like color blindness and size are really important. Heading further down that path, you can often skip legends. They just kind of provide a lot of noise, and organizing things visually in a way that makes sense. For example, time series data can be laid out vertically, and then it's very easy to compare. But if you put 2 time series graphs horizontally next to each other, it can be very hard to figure out what's going on. My rule of thumb is if I woke up at 2 a.m. on call, would I be able to use this immediately? That's worked pretty well for me. But I think the reality is that not all dashboards need this much love. It's fine if you hack something together with that goal of having it around for 2 weeks, just so long as you kind of keep in mind that in the end, these things really do have a tendency to stick around for way, way longer than you think they will. So it can often be worth thinking about. Thanks.
Advances. Hi, I'm Josh. I'm a technology advocate at Splunk, or as I tell my mom, I'm an IT therapist. I'm not actually a doctor or a therapist. I play one on TV or on stages at DevOps Days events. This talk started because of a sign that my wife put in our kitchen. It said marriage is about not finding the right person, it's about being the right person and the importance of being the right person. And I think that's really important as we take these journeys around DevOps. In the Phoenix project, you did set that for 15 seconds, right? Okay. Still not moving. Okay. All right. I had this time. So in the Phoenix Project, Eric, he talks about the dysfunction that is a result of the CEO and the CIO, kind of like a dysfunctional marriage, right? They don't really communicate well. They don't understand one another. They're not really moving forward with what they're doing. This thing's really not going to move on its own, is it? Okay. It's really hard to do and time. All right. I'm going to just talk, and it'll be more than 5 minutes. So let's talk about the relationship between ops and dev that kind of set us up for these conversations. So from the dev side of the house, they're like, why can't you give me the things that I need more quickly, right? Why can't you give me what I asked for? And then from the ops side of the house, they're getting well, why can't you use what I've delivered? If you don't use what I delivered, this can cause problems. It can create issues in how we operate and how we produce. And I know you're waiting, but this is how we have to operate things. And so this creates and maintains this friction. So when we think about DevOps, what we have to start thinking about is how am I able to go into this new relationship and think more than just the role that I'm responsible for. I need to be able to think more about how I communicate with people and work with people. So start with communication, right? Learn about your partners, the new people that you're having to interact more frequently. Learn what their interests are. Learn what their things that they don't like and their communication styles. Talk less, listen more, right? We've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. We've probably heard this in grade school and through our entire life. We're really good at talking about ourselves, and it really keeps us from listening to what other people have to say. And what's really difficult is we get confused about the difference between hearing and listening, right? You can hear someone say something, but that doesn't mean you actually listened. You didn't necessarily internalize what they say. They could be telling you about a pain point or a challenge, and you're not actually getting it. So what you need to do is, as you work to engage in improving your listening, add empathy into that. So when they say, this service just doesn't work fast enough, oh, well, tell me more about that. Let's figure out how we can make that better. Be empathetic and not, just push it off to something else. This should force you to kind of change the way that you think. So rather than just thinking about yourself, you start facilitating more thoughts about other people and how you impact other people, or how you can, both positively and negatively. So thinking about other people improves that relationship. Then that leads you to want to do for other people, right? Once you start listening, once you start developing empathy and you're thinking of other people, you'll make time and put emphasis on providing more for other people and helping them, because in return, they will help you back. The next thing that we as a organization, in IT and an industry, we got to get better about the way we share, right? Hoarding knowledge doesn't help anybody, right? We teach other people the way to do things, teach other people the way we've learned how to do things. Also, be trustworthy, be transparent. If you break something, own it, right? If you failed in something, own it and work to be better. When people trust you, they will engage with you, and everything else I've talked about will continue to improve. One other thing that we fail to do is sometimes we forget to maintain our sense of self, and understanding that we are people, we have our interests, we have the things that we bring to the table. Bring those things into the work that you do. Bring those into the relationship. There's a reason why people early in a relationship likes each other so much. They're getting to know one another. And then make sure you're giving yourself some me time. Right? I am a big proponent of supporting people having mental health days, right? They're like a sick day, but for your brain. And not hungover day. This is, I just can't even when I wake up, right? Take that time and encourage the people around you to take that time as well. When you have successes, because you will have successes, make sure you celebrate together, right? Don't just everybody go off to their own little corners of the world, because we still have our disciplines, but find mechanisms to celebrate your victories together. And then acknowledge the people who do a good job, who made a positive impact, right? And when you take this time, when you look to celebrate, don't stop there. Use that also as an opportunity to start thinking about what you're going to do next and how you're going to improve. Because the net is, in order for us to be the right people, in a relationship, we have to be thinking about the needs of the others, how we can positively impact the other people around us, but not forgetting ourselves in the process. So, a lot of this is talking about how can you be more thoughtful to the people and around you and be the right person without giving up yourself. All right, thank you very much. And thank you for the timer.